Hello, you're listening to the latest Liverpool Echo Blood Red podcast. I'm your host, Matt Addison, with Joe Rimmer and Tom Cavilla both here alongside me. We'll talk about a few young players who impressed against Derby County, including Ben Doak. We'll preview the Liverpool game before the World Cup as well against Southampton. But firstly, neither Joe nor Tom was with me on Monday's show when we recorded just after, of course, that news that FSG were open to selling Liverpool. So should probably get your take on that. The story continues to develop, Joe. There's not been loads of developments. There's nothing particularly concrete at this point, but still plenty of interest across the Echo's website, across Liverpool.com's website as well around the story. So I suppose really just a really generic question to start with. What have you made of it so far?
Yeah, well, first things first, it's a massive, massive story, isn't it? No wonder there's a lot of interest, a lot of speculation, a lot of talk, because, how often does a club like Liverpool change hands? Not very often at all, and when it does, it goes now. We're into the billions, so a massive story, and one that kind of came out of the blue. I mean, when you actually think about it, it probably shouldn't be such a surprise. I think a lot of things add up. You look at the sale of Chelsea in the summer, the economy, and sort of, the rival clubs such as Newcastle and the rise of them, and it all adds up to sort of perfectly good reasons why FSG might want to sell. I still don't think that it's a massive Liverpool are for sale type situation. I think it's a Liverpool can be for sale if the right offer comes along, or you can invest in us. They obviously want investment, that much is clear, but whether that does end up being a full sale, we'll have to wait and see. But I almost think FSG would be happy for the news to be out there, because if it does flush out some interested buyers, then so be it. And whilst a lot of people will probably be wasting a lot of people's time now, there'll be a lot of people that come in who don't have the money or don't really have the seriousness to sort of take on Liverpool. I think for FSG there'll be a lot of interest, and this will now be a slow process, and it's different from Chelsea in many ways. Chelsea, you don't often see a club change hands with the speed in which Chelsea did. Liverpool will be a lot slower than that, if they are to change hands. So it'll be an interesting few weeks now, I think, as we sort of see names come and go, and you go from the most ridiculous, like Conor McGregor, to more people that seem to be a little bit more realistic. Some people maybe in India and other places that sort of, on paper make sense. So it'll be very interesting. I'm sure FSG have got a lot of work to do, and the banks will be making their money in terms of vetting these people. But yeah, and in terms of me personally, obviously mixed feelings. Obviously, we get a lot of FSG apologists thrown at us, but I still like to think that I'm a realist, and I think anyone who has been to Anfield in recent years can do so now with pride and look around the area and the stadium and feel like that can compete with some of the best stadiums in Europe, in world football. And and I think since FSG have come in 12 years ago, Liverpool have made great strides both on and off the pitch. And whilst it's it's easy to sort of look at City and they've done it in a big fashion, Liverpool have done it sort of slightly more under the radar, but they've done it. And I think it's easy to dismiss that. It's easy to just look at transfer spend and recent windows, but I think you look at the state of the club now, and anyone who's buying it, and of course he's written his blood red, and there's no big spoilers on that, but he's looking at why whoever takes on Liverpool now, they won't have huge major surgery to do to the club like FSG did when they came in. They'll come into a very healthy club, which hopefully they can just sort of spend some money in the transfer market, keep things ticking over, keep adding sponsors, keep Liverpool moving with the times, and they should have a very, very successful club. So, and that's testament to the work FSG have done. Have they always been as ambitious as we'd like, and have they always maybe taken chances or backed the manager as much as we wanted in the transfer market? No, but then anyone who lived through Hicks and Gillette has seen much worse. So on balance, I think they've done very well at Liverpool, and I'm still sort of better the devil, so I'm still sort of wary on who would take them on. There's a lot of chances out there that would happily come in and sort of take Liverpool on a whim and a prayer. So I think FSG are going to have to be very cautious about this and vet people very well. But hopefully they find the right buyers if they do sell them.
Yeah, we're still not quite clear, Tom, in terms of whether they want to sell in full, whether this was to possibly just attract a bit of new investment, just to scope out perhaps what's out there at the moment. But we'll see what kind of develops along those lines. What sort of position do you have? Where do you stand on it? Do you have any concerns, or are you just kind of sitting back and assessing what happens and seeing what is to come?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think, as Joe was saying, I think a lot of people given them a lot of criticism over the last few years, but I think it's one of those cases where you kind of got to be careful what you wish for, sort of thing, with the owners. If Liverpool were to get, if FSG did sell up and a new group came to power, and it was, it's sort of similar sort of situation to Newcastle or Manchester City. I'm not too sure Liverpool fans, a lot of Liverpool fans would actually be very happy with that, to be honest. I know there's be some people that would like it from a transfer point of view in terms of being able to compete with, Newcastle and Man City and the financial power they have. But just from sort of more a moral point of view, I'm not sure it would sit too well with a lot of fans. I've seen a lot of that this week. So, yeah, it's a difficult one in trying to find, who would be a good fit for the club, really, because I don't think there's like a definitive answer as to who would be, the next best owners for the club, really. I don't think there's like an obvious solution to it. But I wasn't massively surprised to see this news about FSG come out this week. I think they've kind of got to a point really where you wouldn't be that surprised if they did, sell up. Maybe they don't sell up, maybe they just sell off some shares. But I think maybe it would probably be about the right time, to be honest, if they did move on, because it just feels like maybe they've got to a point where taking it not as far as they can, but maybe as far as they're willing to, in terms of where they've taken it from. So I don't necessarily think it would be a bad thing for Liverpool to have a new owner come in. It's just, like I was saying before, finding someone who sort of fits in with the profile of the club.
Yeah, if they were to move it on, they'd move it on for a big profit on what they paid for it. But I suppose that is the obvious sort of question, isn't it, Joe? Where does this buyer come from? I think from what I've kind of read and the people I've spoken to this week, it kind of feels to me like another US investor might be the way that we're heading with this. Obviously, there's other options as well. There's been suggestions of Dubai, and you mentioned Asia before. There's a number of parties that will come to the table, but I don't know, what have you made of the sort of lists of people? Obviously, taking the likes of Conor McGregor, like you say, the ridiculous ones, take those to one side. There are going to be a good number of realistic ones as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, Conor McGregor, I don't know whether he could afford to buy Liverpool a player, never mind buy Liverpool a club. So, I think it's one of them, isn't it? Like, I think America feels likely because we know from experience and from looking at Chelsea that you get these consortiums of American businessmen who put money together and take a chance on a club like Liverpool. And we know that, anyone who's read, and I fully recommend it if you've not, some of Dave Powell, who's our business football reporter's pieces, he talks a lot about in America that they look at football and soccer clubs and they view them as being very undervalued. Some of the franchises, as they call them in America, for some of their sports are like, $7-8 billion. So, for Liverpool to move for £3 billion, they probably, with the fan base that Liverpool has compared to those American clubs all over the world, they probably are undervalued in their eyes. So that's why America feels likely. But, it's one of them where there's a lot of doubt over whether Middle Eastern sort of bids will materialise, just because some of the biggest ones are already sort of taken, if you like. But then, a couple of things that I've read this week suggested that, obviously India is a massive market, whether they would emerge. China, I don't think there is investment coming out of China now for clubs, for football clubs. So I don't know whether that would happen, but certainly India feels like somewhere which could be realistic, and other places in Asia perhaps as well. So it's difficult, we're just sitting here speculating, aren't we, at the moment? It really is difficult to know who's going to materialise and look at buying Liverpool. But, what we do know is they're going to have a lot of money, and they're going to have to be very powerful. So I think that's why this could be a long process, because FSG are going to have to separate the wheat from the chaff. And if there is somebody who's going to come in fast, they're going to have to be someone that's a real head turner. So I'm very interested. But, as Tom just mentioned, that I'll be honest, I would not accept and would not want for 1 minute an owner like Man City's or Newcastle's, because, I'm not one of them who throws shade at supporters like City and Newcastle's for, you're not responsible for who owns your club. And I think it's very difficult to expect fans to sort of answer the moral dilemmas that come with that. And I think we're all big hypocrites in football, because it's an easy stick to beat them with, and it's an easy thing to throw at their fans. It's not up to them to answer those questions, but also, the same token, I wouldn't, as a football fan, want to have to answer those questions and want to have to sort of swallow that when I went to support my team, or if I wanted to buy merchandise, or if I wanted them to progress. I wouldn't want to see them lifting trophies and have those sorts of questions thrown at the club. So, for me, I would rather Liverpool steer clear of an owner like that, even if it meant all the riches that comes with it, because I just think it's not something I would want associated with Liverpool Football Club. But saying that, any owners who are that rich, there might be questions around. So it could be very difficult. And that's why, I go back to what I said before. It's quite often better the devil you know. And, FSG might have made some silly mistakes, but they don't come with that moral baggage that comes with other ownership groups. So, it's going to be very interesting to find out who it is that emerges as potential investors.
Yeah, it's going to be intriguing, isn't it? I think I read earlier in the week, I think 4 out of the last 7 takeovers or investors in the Premier League have come from the US. So certainly a bit of a pattern emerging there, but plenty of other interest as well, I'm sure. Myself and our Business of Football writer, Dave Powell, recorded a podcast actually earlier in the week, which covered all of the main points. As we say, he is the expert on all of this. So if you haven't checked that out yet, do go across and have a little listen to that. Lots of interesting details on there. But we'll move on. We'll move on to the Derby game. Tom, I know you were out at the academy watching a different set of Liverpool youngsters, but plenty of Liverpool youngsters in the team for the seniors as well. And I suppose the big story among a couple of things, really, I suppose Kelleher and Ben Doak, the two. Let's start with the goalkeeper. No Liverpool goalkeeper, I believe, in Liverpool's history has won more penalty shootouts than him. I suppose that the question is, how long can they keep him, given how good he is? But another exceptional performance from him.
Yeah, he's proving quite reliable, isn't he, in these penalty shootouts? I think I do feel a bit sorry for Kelleher actually, because we've seen his quality quite a lot in these cup games for Liverpool, and he's obviously a talented goalkeeper, but when you've got Addison in front of you, it's quite difficult to get that regular opportunity in the first team. I spoke to Robbie Keane not too long ago, maybe about a month ago, about Kelleher, and he was basically saying that he thought he would have to leave Liverpool, in order to sort of progress his career. Otherwise, he'll just carry on playing second fiddle to Addison, really. And as he approaches, the peak of his career, it's a bit of a difficult one for him in terms of whether he does want to stick around and carry on taking on that role, or does he want to be the main man somewhere else. I wouldn't blame him if he did go elsewhere, because he's obviously good enough to be a starting goalkeeper. Liverpool won't want to lose him, obviously, but I think he'll probably have his eyes lining up something like that further down the line potentially. But for Liverpool, it's a bonus having him around for as long as possible, really, because in these cup games, when you're not playing Addison, he's as good as you can get, really, in terms of a second choice keeper. In terms of Doak, obviously, there's been a lot of promise around him in the academy this season since his arrival, and obviously justified that with a performance in the first team. So that's a real positive for him, and I'm sure he'll want to hopefully get more opportunities if Liverpool progress in the Carabao Cup, which has obviously been competition that's allowed Liverpool to play so many youngsters in recent years. And the fact that he's 17 today but was only 16 making that appearance, that's obviously a sign that they really believe in him in the first team. So long may it continue for him.
Yeah, lots of positives in that regard. Just on Kelleher, Joe, I mean, Jurgen Klopp was asked about him in the press conference earlier on. He kind of asked a similar question to what I asked Tom there, in terms of how long can Liverpool be expected to keep hold of him? How long can he be happy, and all sorts of things? And I thought his answer was really interesting, actually. He kind of said, well, if he does move on, he's got to move somewhere that plays the same way as Liverpool, because he is effectively the perfect Addison understudy.
Yeah, I mean, I love Caoimhin Kelleher. I think he's a really, really talented young goalkeeper, and I think he presents Liverpool with a very unique and difficult problem, in the sense that, like Tom's just said before, he needs to play a bit more football. I think everyone knows that, because he is too talented to be a number 2, but then he's absolutely the perfect number 2 for Liverpool. So, like Klopp said, who does he go to where he gets the right level of football at the right team, and you don't want him to go to sort of a mid to lower table Premier League team, because I think that they bring their own challenges. He'd then be a lot busier. He'd face a lot more shots. They wouldn't play out from the back, things like that. And I don't know whether that would help his development. The only sort of club that I think has dealt with that problem well was Chelsea with Courtois all those years ago, and loaned him for such a long time to Atletico. So whether Liverpool could do something like that to a sort of a top European club, I don't know. I don't know how much interest is in him for them to do that, or whether they could sell him with a buyback clause. But those types of deals you barely ever do. You see, a club go back and rebuy that player. So, it's a really difficult one, but ultimately it's a good problem, isn't it? It's one of those nice types of problems, because you've got Addison there, and I think if Kelleher left Liverpool tomorrow, I'd be disappointed, but it wouldn't be the end of the world because of Addison. But yeah, I think he's a great goalkeeper. I mean, his penalty saves, I mean, the third one was just a magnificent save. The strength and the quickness. And their goalkeeper saved the penalty, didn't he? And he was quite far off his line. And I always remember Doak all those years ago, basically standing on top of Pirlo when he saved his penalty in 2005. And goalkeepers quite often use different advantages, but Kelleher just seems to spring from the moment they touch the ball and get across the goal, which is just, sometimes almost feels like, to me, defies physics. Is the saves when they weren't terrible penalties either. They were really good saves. So yeah, really, really impressive young goalkeeper. So calm. He really, he never shows any emotion, and that's what I kind of like about Addison as well. There are other goalkeepers, I won't name names, that I'm not a huge fan of, because they show so much emotion, and I don't think personally that is a good thing for your defence to have to deal with constantly. An emotional goalkeeper is screaming at you 1 minute, who's geeing you up the next. Addison seems very calm and collected, and Kelleher has the same quality, and that I think is what is most impressive about him. So it's a really unique problem that Liverpool are going to have to find a way of solving, and I think the more performances that he has like that, the more acute that problem becomes. But it's, again, as I said before, it's one of those good problems, isn't it?
I think it's probably a problem they're going to see in other positions as well. They've got so many young talents in that area, Tom. It's, we mentioned Doak there, 17 today, looked really good. There's lots of players in that kind of mould and that category that they've brought in at that certain age, just before they go on and sign that first professional contract. I'm sure Doak will in the next few days, or certainly over the next few weeks, if he hasn't done by the start of next week at the very least. So there's just so many exciting talents. We've seen Bobby Clark play. We've seen Stefan Bajcetic. There's a bright future, I think, maybe not necessarily for all of them at Liverpool, but certainly somewhere in the game. They've just got so many good young talents there at the moment, all at once.
Yeah, they have. And just going back to Kelleher, just going to say, with Man City as well, they had a bit of not a similar situation, but they had that Irish goalkeeper as well. I just thought of it, Bazunu, that they loaned out to Rochdale and Portsmouth, and I think he did really well both of those loans. And City ended up selling him this summer to Southampton for about 12-13 million pounds. So if Liverpool did something similar with Kelleher, or even not necessarily loaning him out, but they would probably get a decent fee for him as well if City managed to get that for a keeper that I don't think he even played a first team game for them. So but yeah, going back to the players Liverpool have got, the young players, I think maybe that Liverpool should look to loan a few more of them out not necessarily Kelleher, as we said, but just some of the ones that are coming through at the moment, just to get them that first team experience of playing somewhere at an EFL side, because I think it's a model that a lot of clubs have benefited from quite a lot. And, it just gives them that experience of actually, men's football, rather than just, although the academy matches are good for their development, you don't quite get the same level of physicality and, technical skill in those matches. So people feel like Ben Doak is probably a bit too early, but I think for a few others, the likes of Frauendorf, other Besetic possibly, but he's probably a bit close to the first team, so necessarily he might not be one that does go. But I think there's so many good youngsters that you've got the option of doing it. Obviously, Waltman's gone out to Doncaster, Leighton Clarkson's at Aberdeen, so they're already doing it with a few players. But I think it'd probably be beneficial to going forward to really sort of kick on with that in all positions of the pitch, really, and not just leaving people with the academy, really.
Yeah, it certainly worked for Tyler Morton this season from what I've heard and people I've spoken to about him. He's been doing fantastically well at Blackburn and potentially could be one of those that comes back into Liverpool next season. So yeah, certainly that is something to look at. Let's talk a little bit about Calvin Ramsey as well. Joey's one that we've not seen loads of so far, but certainly I was really, really impressed with him. Sometimes you look at the way a footballer passes and they touch the ball and you just go, yeah, he's a good player.
Yeah. It's funny that, isn't it? I think with footballers, sometimes a gut feeling just tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? And he does seem to be the type of player. He moves well. He carries himself well. Again, I can't say that much about him because we've got such a small sample size. But just like you, Matt, I have a good gut feeling about him. And I think it's very interesting that when Liverpool signed him, despite him being so young, they didn't. And I know he has played a couple of youth games, but he hasn't featuring with them often. They wanted him in and around the first team squad immediately. And I think if it wasn't for injury, we probably would have seen him more often. I don't think. I'm certain that you would have seen him more often this season, and they rate him very, very highly. So be really interested in the second half of the season after the World Cup, whether he starts to feature a bit more often. Especially if Liverpool progress in the cup competitions further. So, but going back just quickly to loans, I find it interesting because not disagreeing with you, Tom, and I think players do need to be loaned. They need that experience, but I think a good loan is very rare, and I think it's a challenge that the clubs face. It's why they now have loans and pathway managers. That's how Julian Ward obviously made his name at Liverpool, and he obviously did that very well. And I think those types of positions are worth their weight in gold because we've seen so often. I sort of think back to the Benitez era and perhaps the Houdet era of good players coming through and finding and going on loans that just didn't benefit them. I mean, one that springs to mind, and I'm not saying that it would have changed everything for him, but I always remember Neil Mellor going on loan to West Ham and barely featuring. The manager got sacked almost immediately, and he really struggled there. And I think Harvey Elliott obviously really worked out a couple of seasons ago, and Tyler Morton's obviously working there well, and I think Liverpool have built decent relationships, and they know better now where to send players. But I think it's a really crucial part in a player's development. Someone like Ben Doak, for example, if they decide to send him out on loan, you could send him to a club who don't play a certain style or don't, they don't play him enough, and it just totally derails his progress. So I think it's interesting. Sometimes clubs don't even loan certain players, I think, because they don't want them to go through that. So it's a really tricky thing, and I think something that is overlooked a little bit in football. How difficult it is for clubs to find the right loans and forge those relationships where they make sure that their players are looked after and everyone benefits.
Yeah, even within Blackburn, I mean, between Elliott and now Tyler Morton, you had Leighton Clarkson, who was there for 6 months. Same club, same sort of structure, same team, that you'd think it would sort of be logical that if it's worked for the other two, it'd work for him. Didn't work for him, but now he's gone to Aberdeen and suddenly looks a completely different player. So yeah, it is really, really tricky. But of course, the win against Derby sets up a game with Manchester City, Tom. The first one back after the World Cup, just a few days after the World Cup final, in fact. Not quite sure what team we'll see from Liverpool or Manchester City at this point, but certainly one to look forward to.
Yeah, I was watching the draw last night, and I had a feeling Liverpool were either going to get Man City or Man United. I don't know why, and they got the worst one, arguably, out of the two. So no, it would be obviously an interesting one, like you said, in terms of the team, because we've got no idea, how both sets of squads are going to be looking after the World Cup in terms of injuries, and you imagine that Liverpool will probably be in a bit of a better place going into it, just because of the amount of players they've got at the World Cup compared to Man City, who've got quite a few players that are going to be going and probably likely to go deep into the competition. So when they're coming back, you would imagine they're going to be quite tired coming back into this game. But the only positive for Man City, I guess, is their squad depth is so strong, so they probably won't feel it as much as Liverpool in that sense. Liverpool don't have quite the same level of options from the bench this season compared to City. Maybe last season they did, but City will probably be coming back into it. They'll be able to handle it okay, I would imagine. Still, the last time I think they played them, I was just thinking back to that two-legged cup tie they had against City about 10 years ago. That was Craig Bellamy. I seem to remember having a good game in the second leg anyway. But no, it'd be a difficult game. Liverpool couldn't get any more difficult for Liverpool, but you've got to beat the best if you're going to go and win it. So you might as well get it out the way now rather than later on.
Yeah, certainly an interesting task, isn't it, Joe? It's one of those that you kind of think now we've got obviously one game, Southampton, that we'll come to in a second. We'll pick teams for that. Then a break. It's going to be really, really weird, but I suppose the World Cup break in some ways will help Liverpool. Not many of their players going. You'd imagine for that City game that Liverpool probably could be a little bit stronger just because they've got, I think, 7 players compared to about 13 or 14 that City will have going to Qatar.
It sounds like, just from Klopp's comments today, they might play quite a strong team, didn't it? Because he said if Derby had been the only game in 30 days, then they would have it would have been a very different team. So, I think it almost might, it kind of reminds me of the Charity Shield, the Community Shield, because Liverpool will be coming back after what is, in inverted commas, a pre-season, and and sort of playing their first game against Man City. And the teams will be slightly changed. No, I don't have all the subs, but I think ultimately neither side will be that worried about the outcome. For better or worse, I think either side, it won't be make or break for them. So I think you might see a very similar game, and for Liverpool, obviously that worked out well last time because they caught Liverpool City a little bit undercooked and sort of managed to go at them and win it. So, as Tom's just said, if you want to go and win the Decima, which is Liverpool are after this season, the true Decima, number 10, for those who don't speak Spanish there. Tom, I know you speak Spanish, so no problem for you. But yeah, you have to beat the best, and this glorious season could be. Well, sorry, this season could be glorious because they could go and win a 10th League Cup, and we all know it's the world's greatest cup competition. So that's all that matters. So Liverpool better get past Man City and get the job done.
Absolutely. All to play for in the second half of the season. Just before we go on and pick our teams then for the Southampton game, just a quick word on them, Tom. I don't expect you to know a great deal about Nathan Jones. Correct me if I'm wrong. You maybe do. Maybe you know his life story. I don't know. But it's going to be interesting, isn't it, for Southampton? See what they do, see how they play. But for Liverpool, it's just got to be 3 points tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, I think Nathan Jones, he's quite respected at Luton for the job he's done there. I think followed a little bit of what he's done at Luton. Don't know all the ins and outs, but I know he had quite working with quite a low budget at Luton Town, and he's managed to get them sort of in the top end of the Championship in recent seasons. So that's someone they definitely wouldn't have not wanted to lose. I think he may have even left Luton, then come back recently to the club in the position he was at just now. But it's probably made Liverpool's preparation a bit more difficult in terms of, you never know what to expect when you're taking on a team who's just appointed a new manager, and the first game's going to be against you. Liverpool had that same thing against Brighton in October or whenever it was. Yeah, October, I think it was, when De Zerbi was appointed, and that was his first game, I believe, as well, against Liverpool. So yeah, it just adds a sort of a element of the unknown, I guess, in terms of how Southampton will line up. Maybe you might change a few players from the lineup that Hasenhüttl may have played. So I imagine Liverpool will be looking at Nathan Jones' style, probably analysing Luton matches to see how he sets his side up. But yeah, it does make it a little bit more difficult to prepare for. But I think it's really important Liverpool win this game in terms of just going into the World Cup on a high and carrying on that, building on that Spurs performance, really. So, yeah, I think they really need to get the 3 points.
I can tell you a little bit about Nathan Jones. He was a former Welsh international, managed Luton, had a small role in the hit film Troy, and also featured on WWE SmackDown in the early noughties. So there you go. So that is Nathan Jones. That'll probably go above both your heads, but so does the same Nathan Jones. So yeah.
Yeah, there we go. I was going to add that he was at Stoke for a bit of time and didn't really do much, and then went back to Luton. But Joe, you've covered us. So let's move on to our team selector then. Alisson Becker will come back in goal. Joe, back four, complete change from midweek?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously I had Trent back in there, Konate and Van Dijk, and then Robertson. I think you're going to see a strong team here because Liverpool just need to win this game and get into this World Cup break. Keep calling it a break, but for many players, it's anything but. But they need to get into this World Cup period on the back of a win and just put this part of the season to bed and hopefully come back refreshed. So yeah, my back four. I think Konate coming back has been absolutely massive for Liverpool, and I really don't think you can underestimate how difficult it has been for Liverpool without him. I think towards the second half of last season, you saw Liverpool's style evolve further because they could defend high up. He's quick. Against Tottenham, he was absolutely outstanding. The amount of headers he won. He's absolutely dominant in the air, isn't he? And we're so used to seeing Van Dijk win so many headers, but it feels like when Konate plays, he takes the lead and he's the one that goes and attacks all those long balls. He was superb. So I think he can have a really positive effect on Liverpool, hopefully in the second half of the season, and hopefully he doesn't pick up any injuries at the World Cup. But yeah, I think he's a magnificent player, and I'm really pleased that he's back.
Yeah, glad he's going to the World Cup, actually gets the recognition. Whether he'll play or not, I don't know, but we shall see. Tom, is that the same back four for you as well? If it is, you might as well move on to your midfield.
Yeah, I think I'll go for the same back four there. I think, like you said, you've got to go as strong as possible in the last game. So going on to the midfield then, I think probably play Thiago, Fabinho and Henderson. I think I'd go for those three. Again, same sort of point, going out of the last match, I think it's important to have sort of the best players out there. So Harvey Elliott maybe could feature, but having played on midweek, I think I expect Henderson playing alongside Fabinho and Thiago. I'd go with.
I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to play Henderson as the 6, Thiago to the left, and Elliott to the right. But which way are you going to go, Joe?
I'd play Fabinho, and I'd play Henderson and Thiago alongside him. I think Elliott's done very well this season at times, but I don't know. I'm not. I think I've said before on podcasts, and I don't mean this as a knock to Elliott. It really isn't. But I think he's played too much football in the first half of the season. I think Klopp would never have envisioned him playing this much football had everyone been fit, and I think he would have been eased in a little bit more. So I would play the three of them, and I know that probably feels a bit conservative against home Southampton, but I just want Liverpool to get some consistency back, a bit of a solid base back, and also help sort of try and get Fabinho back into top form. And I think those two players around him sort of support him a little bit more. So that's what I'd do. And then you've got Elliott to come from the bench, and he can come on in different positions. So that's mine.
Yeah, certainly a good option to have off the bench. Tom, front three?
I think it's got to be Salah, Nunez and Firmino as a 3. Again, lack of options really in that area at the minute still, with Jota and Diaz out. So again, got to go for the strongest 3, and I think that's that's got to be those three really.
Yeah, positive update on Luis Diaz, but obviously not going to be featuring this weekend. Joe, possibly back after the World Cup. Is it the same three for you as well?
Absolutely, yeah. Salah and Firmino are in there, and I just, Darwin Núñez is quickly becoming my absolute favourite Liverpool player. I just love watching him. I think everything about him gets you on the edge of your seat. He's mad in more ways than one, isn't he? And look, I mean, for me now, I just want to see him in the Liverpool lineup every time they play, because I think in this first half of the season, when it's been very, very difficult, he's been something we can all cling to for a bit of hope. I think had this team been performing so much better, people would be raving about Darwin Núñez, but because Liverpool have had a poor season, the poor parts of his game have been highlighted by many sections of the fan, not Liverpool's fan base, but the wider football fandom and media as well. But I think anyone who's watched him regularly this season for Liverpool would know that he has got a hell of an upside, and not only is he really, really dangerous, he's just the sort of player that you want to watch. I'd have him starting almost every game at the moment. So yeah, I definitely have him there, and I really like him from the left. I'm still, it feels like maybe Klopp's turned the corner with him there, but it felt like Klopp was quite reluctant to play him off the left earlier this season. Maybe against Spurs, that sort of convinced him a bit more. But even after the Spurs game, saw one or two little thing in the Guardian, sort of strangely criticising him, which I thought was quite odd, considering I thought he was by far away Liverpool's most dangerous player against Spurs. So yeah, that's where I play him, and I'm just excited to get to Anfield tomorrow and see him.
100% in agreement. Let's go for match predictions then. I think I'll say 3-0 to Liverpool. I think they'll keep a clean sheet. Joe, how do you reckon it might go?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm sort of confident about tomorrow. I think the Tottenham game, they can take some confidence from that. And I think a strong side, I would expect strong results, and Núñez in on the action. So yeah, 2-3-0. I'll go 2-0. Nice solid 2-0.
3-0, 2-0, and Tom, what are you going to say?
I was going to go 2-0 as well. Joe's beating me to it. I'll stick with 2-0. I think we'll go for that.
Good stuff. Wins and clean sheets all round. So we'll leave it there, I think, for today. We'll be back, of course, after the Southampton game with Monday's Blood Red podcast. Plenty more content around on the website and the channel before and after that as well. But until next time, from all of us here, it's goodbye for now.